I got Lucas McGill here. Tommy Lepore here from Blue Springs South. Brett Norfleet.
Hello, everyone. Welcome inside the Red Earth Production Studios for another edition of YBMcast, powered by Game 7 Baseball, game7baseball.com. Dave and Dave getting ready for the season, working around. We're going to be talking with Dave again in February, right before the start of the tournament season. I mean, it's like spring training, and they've got all their tournaments going up. They got one more discount left. February 7th, you got your 3 for 30, 4 for 40, and 5 for 50 going on. Don't miss out on that. Get your team registered. Get in some tournaments. Enjoy the spring and summer. Dave and Dave over at Game 7 Baseball do a great job. Scott Harris with us today. He is the athletic director at Francis House Central and also the Gateway Athletic Conference here in the county president. Scott Harris, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Brian. I'm glad you guys had me on. Things are going well. We're about halfway through our winter season here in the high school scene, with postseason starting here in the next few weeks for wrestling, boys and girls wrestling, swimming, and basketball. So it's fun, every night's a different game, exciting game, and then we're only about 4 weeks or 5 weeks from the start of spring sports and baseball time,
Exactly. Can you smell the grass, man?
I drive in every day. It's been so nice. The last couple of days, we've had the kids on the turf doing workouts and everybody long tossing, and you hear the clanging of the bat going. So it makes me feel like baseball when I pull off campus each day.
Exactly. I love it, man. We're close to pitchers and catchers reporting for MLB. The college season starting. So hopefully we'll get Kevin Mulder in here shortly to join the show. But Scott, I want to start off. I know this is I didn't have this on notes, but I want to ask you. And and I don't mean this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything. But Troy Buchanan is putting turf on the baseball field up there for this coming. Hopefully they'll get it in. And it looks like they're going to have it for the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
What is that looking like for a Howell, for Zumwalt, for some of these other GAC schools? Is that in the mix somewhere down the road?
I would think so. And Troy is they are, to your point, they're doing the whole field, the infield and outfield. They're going to cross over between baseball and softball in the fall, and that's going to be done by this spring. Washington built 2 fields down there. They're in the GAC. Washington built a softball only and a baseball only field where they turfed just the infield and left the outfield grass. So that'll be 2 schools out of our 18 that have it. And I really say this. I think I said this before, maybe even to you guys. It's almost like 30 years ago. I mean, I was in high school and my friends were running track. In Mexico, Missouri had an all-weather track. And nobody else had it. Oh, my goodness, it's crazy. You run on cinders every day or asphalt. You go to Mexico and run on all weather. It was beautiful. Now there's not a track in the state of Missouri that's not all weather in that. 15 years ago, I think CBC and Dominic had turf football fields. Now 98% of the fields are turf football fields. And now you see in baseball, I think 3 years ago we had Vianney, Chaminade, maybe MICDS, a few private schools. Now, counting Troy and Washington and Lindbergh, there's probably 20 or 25 public schools, in the area that has turf baseball. And I think what it is, it is a big sticker shock. The upfront cost is pretty substantial. Mm-hmm. And if you're a school district, there's tightening that really have to be conscientious of your budget. Sometimes you're like, perception and reality. Do we spend $400,000 or $700,000 on a turf field, or staffing, or is it textbooks, or is it putting HVAC in a school? So it's a tough decision for schools to do. But I think it comes down to this. The schools finally look at the big picture and say, we're spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year to play on a grass field. That's not counting the man hours to get it ready. That's just the upkeep, the fertilizer, the mowing it, the watering it. That's $50,000 a year to get a grass field. And because of that, you limit the use of it. You practice in the outfield. You're on it only when you have to be. Whereas if you get turf, you can be PE classes. You can be every level of baseball or softball. The cost per usage, is just night and day. So I think more districts now are saying, it is a big upfront cost, but in 5 years or 7 years, 10 years tops, it's going to be the same amount of money, and I'm going to have a turf field. And while a lot of schools, especially the private schools I've seen, are getting very creative, they use it as an alternative revenue source. They'll rent it out to these tournament organizations. They'll rent out the club teams for practices, So then you're helping to raise funds to pay for the replacement of turf or the cost of it. So I think that's kind of where we're going. And in 5 years, when you and I are talking, I bet half the schools have it. I think Zumwalt and Howell, their Board of Education, their administration will look down and see. I think there too, though, you look at Troy, the one school community. Mm-hmm. They're putting one turf field in. Washington's a one school community. Right. They did too. But if you're Fort Zumwalt, you got to put 4 in. If you're Wentzville, you got to put 4 in. If you're Francis Howell, you got to put 3 in. So then the cost is not $500,000 for an infield or $700,000. Now you're looking into 2 or 3 millions. Which I mean, still it's going to pay for itself over time. But that's a big upfront cost. So I think that's where probably most of the schools in our county area are at.
One of the things that I think is interesting about what you said is parents always talk about, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? It's not just, a decision of this or that. You have to weigh everything. And like you said, when you start talking about a Zumwalt or a Howell or a Wentzville school district, you're not talking about one school. And that to me is exactly where the thing is, because you have to do it. And do you do it all at once, or who goes first?
Right.
And that becomes, well, why do they get to go first? And I don't care. I know it sounds kind of childish, but still in that respect, I guess you could flip a coin or draw straws, but you still have that factor, don't you?
Oh, without a doubt. I coached in the Wentzville School District when Timberland opened up. So Hope was the established school. I was a coach at Timberland. And I promise you, we were going back and forth. What's Holt doing? What do they have? And they were doing the same thing. And that goes on. That's 20 years ago now. And then now I work in a district with Howell and Howell North. So it's always, from coaches to parents to administrators, always like, well, they're getting this. And if you're a school district that has to balance all of that, it's a tough balancing act and really a tough decision to make when you have to make that decision.
And, the one thing that me personally, and I'll be honest, I like the turf. I think about the turf. I think it's a great thing. But I'll be honest, I would much rather have lights.
It's funny you say that. We had an AD meeting yesterday, and a couple of us went to lunch afterwards. We were talking about that. And really, in our conference, Troy has it in Washington. They're not real rural areas, but they're not in the St. Charles County. And I really don't know the reason why. I guess I've always heard some parts of St. Louis may have ordinances, but I mean, we have football lights, we have soccer lights, so it's not an ordinance here, of course. I think maybe just years ago, people said, we're going to play baseball at 4, and you don't need lights. And so they never built lights. And when the Zumwalt didn't build lights, the Howells didn't build lights, the Wentzville didn't build lights because nobody else had it. So really, you're exactly right. I would argue, because with turf fields, we're going to play the game. Anybody at grass field, we're going to tarp it and get it played. Or you know what, we're going to come back tomorrow and play it. Or we're going to come back Saturday and make it up. I mean, I never thought the turf's about the games, I think the turf is about practices, You can go out there on March 1st, and it might be 25 degrees, but you can get on a dry field. It can rain 3 days in a row, whereas you might be shut down for a week. You get on a dry turf field and do it, But to your point, I think the day-to-day, the lights may have a bigger impact on games because of you can play until 8 o'clock at night or whatever.
Right. And I think that to me is, and especially significant where I've been on the field as an umpire, and all of a sudden, man, that sun starts going down, and that can be a little dangerous too. You get in that game that's a little late, and all of a sudden it's like, man, it's people are having a hard time seeing the baseball, and that can just be a safety factor. So I think those
and I've seen. You're exactly right, Brian. I've been on, as a coach, I've been in that situation as an AD. I'm always scared to death. Like, can we get one more in? Can you get one more in? Umpires are looking at me. Parents are asking me, and I'm looking at the coaches. We had a quarterfinal softball game 2 years ago against Troy, 2 conference schools playing, and we go 12 innings. And we had to stop it. I mean, and I hated that. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for anybody. Of course, that was a little different that day because Troy obviously had lights. So the Troy community was like, we're playing this at our place, we'd be playing right now. I'm talking about it. We got to go home and see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock, But luckily in baseball, or some early games, to your point, though, you'll lose that light. But as the spring goes on, we get more and more daylight. But obviously, if you get into a 10-8 game, it's getting to be 6:30. It's hard for the umpire to see the pitcher and catcher. But that has a bigger impact on the day-to-day. I agree with you.
I just think it's an interesting subject matter, and I think there's probably pros and cons to each side, but that's just my thoughts on it. It was just interesting to me because, you can do a little bit more. As you said, you could go through the day and maybe play it at 7 o'clock at night because the field, you had the time, even if it rained, you had the time to let it dry out. You had the time to work the field a little bit, and you can play at 7 o'clock.
Right.
Just some thoughts.
Right.
So I want to get into a little bit here. GAC. We've talked a lot about the talent level over the last little bit with the GAC, and I'm not talking just about one particular conference, but it's across the board, North, South, and the Central, and I'm sure you're part of the GAC, you're the president, but let's talk a little bit. Is it the top conference in baseball in the state?
Well, we take a lot of pride, and I grew up in this area. I did not play in the GAC conference, but I was at a neighboring district or whatever, and I've been a fan since the early 80s, mid 80s. I've watched it closely. Then I coached in it, and I've been an AD for 16 years in the conference. And I have got a lot of pride for our conference. But, man, I think when you talk about top to bottom being 18 schools, it would have to be in the discussion. I know the MCC with Smet, CBC, and Vianney all winning state titles in the last 6, 7, 8 years. And I'm not sure the breakdown in Kansas City with the Blue Springs South, Liberty North. I'm not sure how their conference alignment is. A lot of good teams there. But I think when you look at ours, to your point, with this 18 schools, it's 3 divisions. We've got 3 or 4 schools that are Class 4. We've got 4 or 5 schools that are Class 5. And we've got 6 or 7 schools that are Class 6. So across 3 different classifications, year in, year out, we have teams that are going to contend for a state title. And so I think based on that, you have to say we're one of the top, if not the top, baseball conference in the state. This because it's spread over 3 different classifications and different divisions. And really any year, if you come out of the GAC, you got a chance to win a state title. I mean, I've talked before about, I know last couple of years, Howell was there, Class 6 last year, finished 3rd. They beat Howell Central in a great 2-run game there. The year before, Howell was Zuma West beat Howell in a great game. Could have went either way, and Zuma West got 2nd. But even last year, Howell was 7-3 in the conference, finished tied for 2nd. 5 years ago when Zuma West finished 2nd in Jet City, I believe, they were like 4th in our conference, but got hot and came in and lost on a walk-off hit by pitch. So they're like 1 play away from being state champs. And they finished 4th out of 6. So, I mean, and then like last year, I think Zuma East was 5-5 in the Central Division, but yet they go to the Final Four. So I really believe the balance, how deep it is, and all of those things, all those factors lead into arguably being the best baseball conference in the state, I would say.
And you look at, I love what your point was there, because you look at Class 5, Class 6, the last 2 years, we've sent 2 teams.
Yeah.
Both years it was South the year, East, and then, as you said, West and Howell, and then St. Charles West, Warrenton. They've had real good success in St. Charles, district champs. They've had a really good run. Coach Allen's doing a great job with that program over there. I think Warrenton over there. I believe it's Cannon Hibbs, the third baseman.
Yeah, rookie player, yeah.
I mean, just up and down. And I think when you look at this, and then it'll be interesting to see, but I think North Point is going to be, a solid baseball team there. It's kind of tough because I'm sure some of the other schools are going, hey, you're taking my kid.
Right, right.
It's one of those things. But I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at 2023 up and down. I was just on the PBR state rankings, from Adam Hatch, from Brett Norfleet, Seth Bennis, Tanner Paschke, Bryson Naputi, Jackson Barry, Kenton Deverman, Lane Harris, Connor McCaleb. You go down through that's all pitching.
Yeah.
Who do you want to face?
Well, and that's the thing, and especially that 2023 class, I've been close. I've watched most of those kids play with and against those kids. My son is 8 or 10 years old. But you're right. If you come through your year, it'd be tough to answer your question. It'd be very tough to be a hitter in the GAC right now because there's no days off. Because every time you turn around, you're facing a big time arm, most likely a Division One arm in a lot of cases. So that leads to the point where you get in the playoffs, you're probably not going to be overmatched. I mean, I don't care if you're a Class 4, Warrenton, who has some very, very good players, St. Charles West, have all made great runs. You're going to, whether you match up in the state sectional, state quarterfinal, or Final Four, you're not going to be overmatched because you've seen it. You've seen it 2 or 3 times a week by all those pitchers in the conference. And I think that leads to it. You look at, Hal and Jamal West being in the Final Four the last 2 years in Class 6. It could have been the other school, they beat a GAC school to get there. So it could have been a different GAC school there. And then you mentioned South and East. It's just, I really believe the number of arms you just mentioned, all those pitching, when you get to the playoffs, you've seen high-level pitching, and you've had to get bunts down. You've had to move runners over. You've had to fight and claw at bats and not just sit there and strike out 15 times or whatever. A lot of times, I went to the Final Four a lot of years. Everybody throws their big gun in the semifinal. And some people's eyes are wide. They never seen that before, and it's 15 strikeouts. You're not going to strike out a GAC team 15 times because they've seen it all year long.
That's a great point. And then, just after this, you guys, a 1-2 punch you have with Braden Rubel as well, as long as you with your son Lane. But then Maddox Meyer over at St. Charles High School.
Yep.
That kid's got a great arm. I mean, you're talking Class 5. In the Class 5, Nolan Folks over at Holt. You just keep going down, and then that's where you get into a lot of the position players as you move down there. Trevor Lovell, Quentin Klusner, another player with you, Ethan Weiler, Peyton Braille, Brady Wilson, Cannon Hibbs, Brady Holtman, Caleb Miller, Aiden Rogers, Aiden Cole, Will Minch, Wyatt Miller, Colby Wren, Carter Allen, Ethan Wasson. I mean, that's a list of kids, talent up and down the line that when you come into play a game on a Tuesday, Wednesday, you're seeing some really high-level talent. And that was just the 2023s. The list of, I mean, you've got the 2025s. Leo Humbert, Richie Swain, Brennan Goring over at St. Charles West. That kid is for real.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, you talk about Class 4. I mean, St. Charles West's been Class 4. Brennan Goring can play at any level. That kid,
yes,
he can play. He could play Class 6 baseball, and that's just the short and tall of it. And I think and people go, well, so could that. Not all. That's why you get it. You have these upper echelon, and I shouldn't put it in that classification as playing Class 6. But you just have, when you get into some of these bigger schools, you're able to have a larger talent pool. That's the difference in the classification process, correct, Scott?
Yeah, and I think that's why they've always done it that way. The larger school, it's the depth. It doesn't always play out that way. In some sports, it affects different than other. Of course it does, But I think the biggest difference you see from a smaller school is not the elite. An elite player in Class 1 or 2 could be an elite player in Class 6. That's not it. I think it's just a number of players and, and the depth of players, like I said, I think that's the biggest difference you see between a smaller classification school. It's just a depth.
And that, to me, is what's really interesting. You look at some 2024s, of course, Titus Sissel and Adam Shipley. And Adam Shipley, you talk about an athlete. That kid just led his team to a state title over at Howell. Jackson Carter at Zumwalt East. That kid, I've been watching. I follow him, whatnot. He's a unbelievable athlete. That kid is an unbelievable athlete. And Chase Lassiter over at Holt, really like that kid. Carter Cox, Logan Kowick, Dalton Hosack, Kyle Edgar. That's a great 1-2 punch at Holt.
Right. And I think, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you mentioned Holt, who based on some numbers and enrollment, they won't come out until mid-March, but I would see them being Class 5, they move down. And that can fall in that role. You look at the Zumwalt South 2 years ago, Zumwalt East last year. If you put Holt with that 1-2 punch, they're used to winning, had a great year last year. they're going to be a real scary class. They've been a good Class 6 team. And now Hope playing Class 5, they're going to scare a lot of people, and they can make a run Class 5.
I agree, and that was that's why we bring that up, because you got a flip flop in the Central and South. It's the only one. Francis Howell North is going back to the GAC South, and Holt is going to the GAC Central. And I thought that was interesting, and as you put that, it's the probability because of their enrollment numbers,
right?
And classification is based on enrollment numbers. So I thought that was interesting. That was my first thought, is you're looking at a possibility that they're into Class 5, correct?
Yeah, I would think so. They'll come out. Now, used to be Michigan would do it on 2-year. They'd assign you to a district and a classification on 2-year cycles. But with the with the success factor coming in for the non-public schools, and different things like that, now they do it every year. So we'll probably find out, usually the second Friday of the season. So probably mid-March, the classifications will come out. But it's based on Holt's enrollment dropping due to the North Point opening. They took a pretty big hit, and that was causing a move from the South, which is the 6 biggest schools in our conference, down to the Central, which is the 6 middle-sized schools. I would anticipate Holt's enrollment and putting them at Class 5, right?
And I concur with your assessment. If Holt is in that Class 5, wow, and then the GAC Central, as you said, Southeast, Holt, you have Liberty right there.
Yeah.
And my goodness, I mean, just it's like you said, and you going on your conference schedule, you really have you can't take days off. You got to compete, and I think that's the beauty about conference baseball in the GAC is how it's preparing you. Yeah, you can go and even play a tough non-conference schedule as well, get into a couple tournaments. But man, you in my opinion, I think you ought to go play a little harder early in the season just to get yourself ready for what you're going to face in your own conference.
You're exactly right. I mean, like I said, because you jump right out of the frying pan into the fire. So luckily, in our case, we got a Troy tournament, which Jason Smith does a great job up there, a 16-team tournament. And there's several GAC schools. He does a good job of splitting them up and bringing in the CBCs and some good smaller schools in Wright City and different teams. And then a lot of people go right into the Midwest Classic. And Coach Perkins has done that for so many years. He does a great job with that tournament. So, I mean, really, you can get 10 games in, but you need those 10 games because then that next Tuesday, you're going right into conference play. You might be seeing Adam Hashman or Jackson Yardberry or you just name 20 of them. It could be any of those 20 guys. They're staring at you,
Exactly. And, one of the great things, and we're looking forward to the GAC Game of the Week again this year. And you'd sent me the schedule early on, and I'm going through, and we are looking at always some of the premier matchups. I know that's tough, because you like to get as many people involved as possible, but we also are looking for these matchups. And there is going to be, when you're talking about premier pitching matchups and the schools and stuff, we're discussing, and then you look at rivalries and things of that nature. And right off the bat, we're going right back to South and East. And it's been a very good rivalry. I think, and I'm an East guy. Both my kids graduated from East. My son played for Russ. But I still think there has to be a little bit more from the East side. They haven't won as much as South. So, I mean, it is a little tougher. That rivalry is there, but I think East is a little more I think they split last year. I think we may see that again this year with the level of talent on these teams. So it might swing a little bit. Don't know. And I think that leads off. Then we got opportunities for Timberland and Howell Central and Francis Howell. And I think these matchups, I mean, coming off that game you guys played last year with Howell, that district quarterfinal, that was unbelievable. The electricity in the air, the student body, it was one of the best high school environments for baseball I've ever been in. And I just love how the GAC is creating those opportunities.
Well, you mentioned, I think you and I stood by each other that game last year. It was exciting. I go back to when I watched the Zumwalt West and Hal game the year prior, and the crowd, that was an unbelievable environment. Hal got to the big lead. West came back and won that, and that was a great environment. And then last year, leading up to the Hal Central game, was crazy because we had them like a week and a half off. So all this build up and able to look at some research. We've played like 32 times since our schools opened up, and it's pretty close. I mean, don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere around that. And the meetings is pretty much even. We've never met in the playoffs because we're always in the same district. Never met in past districts or whatever. So now here we are, two big rivals. Hal's one of the best baseball districts in the state. We've had a lot of tradition. Now we're playing on the biggest stage in the quarterfinal. And you're right, that crowd out there had to be close to 1,000 people, and just those are things. My son was on the bench as a dad. I was happy with my son to be around a game like that as an AD, watching my kids commit that and come out a great game. I mean, the beauty was great. Rubel was outstanding again, second straight game. Brought in Elo from the bullpen. He was great. And basically, it was a two-run game. We had 2 runs on, and we hit one. Nick Orton now has won the gap. I think it's tied. I think we're tied now. We're 3-3. Go ahead and run on top of the 7th. And maybe, in my opinion, the only guy in the state that can get that ball is Ty Sissel. And he runs it down. I mean, like I said, I say all the time, I talk to his dad, I talk to Ty, and to Coach Perkins. If anybody else in center field, it's probably tied, and we have to go ahead and run on third base, But he ran it down, and they won it. But, that's the thing in the GAC. But the East plays South. Those are great, great matchups, When North plays South and East, Holt's in that mix now. Even St. Charles High, St. Charles West. When they play each other, there's so many great matchups in the GAC that bring the student bodies out, bring the common baseball fan out. And that's what I think is so great about it. You come out here on 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, there's 400 or 500 people here for a baseball game. That's unheard of,
And we're looking, and I know we're going to end the season. I think that last weekend we've got the Liberty Holt matchup. And, you're talking about either Dalton Hosack or Kyle Egger. Both kids can really pitch. Seth Bennis. I mean, it just is electric. And when I'm excited about this, because you're talking about, here's a kid going to Indiana, Hosack and Edgar. They still got a year there, but right. These kids are potential D1 arms. It's potential still there. But I think you're talking about high level, high leverage pitchers, possibility, touching 90. And when you're seeing this and you go out to these games and then the talent surrounding them on both these teams is just remarkable. And, you try not to build it up too much, but you can't. This is what it is. And, that you hope. And as the GAC president, and I would imagine across all sports, you're just hoping that continues.
Oh, yeah, I take a lot of pride. Of course, I'm a Hal Central guy, and I really want us to win and have success and achieve at a high level. But I do take a lot of pride in our conference. I really do. And whether it's, I think back, I don't want to name too many, but in the fall, Hal in football, and Hal in several sports. Hal had softball and football, and then the golf. I think Zumwalt South's golf or tennis finished second. Like I said, I hate to mention teams because I know I'm leaving somebody out. But there were multiple Final Four teams in the fall. Wintertime, we've got several teams that are going to contend for a wrestling state titles, individual state titles, team state trophies. In the spring, there'll be girls soccer teams making runs. There'll be multiple baseball teams. As a president of JC, it's my last year, my 4th year here, so my term's almost up. But I really just love our conference having success because really, if our conference has success, it makes our school look better. There's so many good coaches, so many good administrators, of course, so many good athletes in our conference. It's fun to cheer for them, and see them have success.
Absolutely. I want to finish up here. This is always the one that kind of sits out there. But I want to talk about this because I think it's an important topic. But officiating. It's been a topic throughout the last, I don't know, probably 5 years. And it doesn't seem to, I don't want to put a negative on it in the sense of just, oh, it's horrible. No, it's not that. But there should be concern to these things. How are we as a group, when you're talking about a high school, a conference, how do you take those opportunities? How are you helping some of these associations? And are the associations looking for the help to grow and to help kids that maybe athletically they're not going to achieve that, but coming back and getting into the profession of officiating and being part of that process, staying in the game, in the community, and keeping the level of umpires at a place where the game is not going to suffer from it?
Well, Brian, that's a great point. And then the point you brought up, I think that's where we have to go. How do we get those current athletes, there? Because you're right, there is a shortage, and baseball and softball has been kind of the most impacted. We've had lower level games canceled quite frequently. We've had lower level games with only one official or one umpire there, and you hate the fact it was an 80-degree day in the spring and go out there, your field's sitting there, you can't play a game because of there's an umpire shortage. But the problem is real, and there's several reasons why it could be. But to your point, it doesn't matter why. We're here. So how can we fix it? But you're right. I think the assigners, the associations, I think the high schools, I think MSHA, our governing body, all see the severity of the problem. They're all trying to work together to do different things, from like trying to be creative with your schedule, to help out the flexibility with the current ones we have, trying to make more Saturday games, more starting a little bit earlier, playing double headers, trying to be creative to work with our existing numbers, we do. But recruitment has got to be our biggest. I think recruitment is where we really see the biggest impetus on right now, because we got to get more. So to your point, I think a few things. We're really hitting all of our current students. I think all the schools are talking to their student athletes. We have a captive audience with them. We're going to the PE classes, talking to them. Missions offer things where, if you're a student, they'll waive your officials costs for the year. They're trying to get creative, saying that if you're a young official, first-time official, we'll waive your fees for that year. Some associations are doing that. They're really having camps in our summertime to get young kids. Because really, we all got to stop playing at some point. It may be 15, maybe 18, maybe 22. You're going to stop playing at some point. And the only way to stay involved is either as a coach or an official, because your playing days are over. We want to get those people who have a passion for the game, that love the game. We were at an AD meeting yesterday, and they're starting a program where I can't remember the name of the company, but really they're offering like online classes. So a lot of schools are putting in their PE curriculum. They're offering an officiating class. So I'm taking PE, I'm taking team sports, I'm taking badminton. Now they're offering a officiating class. So you can do online classes and stuff like that. So you can come out of high school, put that class, and we'll put you in touch with associations and start working games. So all those are we're trying to do. But like I say, we're trying, how can we work with our current officials? How can we protect our current officials and retain them? But I think the biggest thing is recruitment of new officials.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say? And I would caution parents, people out. I understand. We see a missed call. We see a strike call that we don't agree with. And as an official, I've been behind the plate, heard them. You hear, oh, come on, Blue. If I don't get 3 or 4 of those in a game, it's just not baseball to me. And that never bothered me. It's close call. Okay. Fair enough. But what would you say to parents, fans, people coming out? How are we helping that situation? I don't want to take away the excitement of the game or, the emotion, but how can we as parents be better with these situations and not get overblown about who, what, missing? What do you guys do as far as schools in that respect?
Well, every school's a little different, but I think we've all kind of taken a common theme. I really hit it in my parent meetings, and we have seasonal parent meetings before you start. And I explain to them, I'm a very emotional guy. I said, you stood next to me at a quarterfinal game. I'm excited. I'm cheering, and people are gonna cheer or get excited about a call, and that's part of the game. I think most people can live with that. It's just when it gets personal, when it drags on. I tell my parents, I'm not gonna say, hey, oh, over his back or whatever, the travel. I mean, that's going to happen. Oh, that's a strike, or he was out, that's going to happen. People know that. People can live with that. It's just when it goes past that, the play's over, and you're getting personal. I said, don't make it personal. Don't add on to it. Like, I promise you, I coached for a long time. I even officiated for a little bit. It's a hard job. And I promise you, nobody in that row cares who wins. They do not care. I mean, I tell a Hal Central parent, they're not making calls for Hal North or Hal. They're not trying to cheat us. They're not trying to do that. I promise you, they're not. They don't even care about that, But people get so wrapped in it. I'll be honest, Brian, it's just very emotional now for a lot of reasons. I mean, people are paying a lot of money for pitching lessons. People are paying a lot of money for hitting lessons. So when I get struck out looking, or if I hit a bad pitch, I mean, it's more emotional now. So now, not only to my son making an out, is, man, I spent X amount of dollars on hitting lessons. He can't make it out. I mean, I hate to say that, but that is part of it. I mean, or if my son throws a ball or my daughter throws a ball, I go pitching lessons 3 nights a week. I paid for that. I can't be a ball. And that money investment makes me feel more emotional. So now it's not just a ball for. Now it's like, oh, my son or daughter walked somebody while I'm paying all this money for pitching lessons for. It's really gotten more emotional. And I love it. I mean, I'm one of those parents that pay for pitching lessons. But it makes it more emotional. And when you're more emotional, I think it leads to more yelling and more living and dying on every play. We just tell them to enjoy the game, enjoy your kids playing, and don't make it personal.
I love that. I had never considered your take on that. That was interesting, and I think you're right. I think it does create that more emotion, because as you said, I've done that. I've been there. Parents, food for thought, man. Take that into account. I think that's a great point, Scott, and something we should consider. We're trying to help our kids get better, and as you said, I've been to clinics. I've been to these places. There are people out there working with these umpires to help them get better. They don't see everything. And if you've never worked a 2-man crew, the angles in baseball, the angles that you do, you're doing the best you can to get in the best position to see everything. And I've seen it at the major league level. Guys are not quite in the right position. There's 4 dudes on the field. And it can make the difference between, and they have the benefit, of course, instant replay. But I always thought it was interesting when you watch that. Most of the time, the umpire's right.
I listened to I can't remember, a couple of years ago now, the commissioner of baseball. They asked him, "What's the first thing you do when you get to work?" He said, "I look at every instant replay for the night before." So on a typical major league night with 30 games, I think he said there's maybe 100-ish replays, whatever.
Wow.
His point was, what is crazy to me is 98% of those they get right, and they'll go back and review. Now there's some that's overturned, but they're in live. They're watching it live speed, and they make the call. They review it. He says something crazy number, at least 95%. But that was his point as well. He goes, "It's crazy how good they are because they get them almost all right at live speed,
And I don't mean this in a bad way, but this is why sometimes the younger officials, and getting some younger officials, I will tell you folks, and this is from experience, the GAC, as we discussed and we showed you, has some really high-level talent. And when you're talking about kids throwing 90 plus, I don't want, I mean, at my age, I don't know, maybe earlier you just don't think about it when you're young, but really how it's hard to stand in a batter's box with somebody throwing 90 miles an hour plus at you, man. It's not. And
I couldn't do it.
As an umpire, you've got to have some really high-level catchers to catch a person like that. And it can get a little, sometimes if that trust and building things, these are nuances of umpiring. Trusting the catcher who's got a kid throwing 95, and it's just hard to do. It's really hard to do. It's not an easy skill. And the speed of the game. And when you've got a 2-man crew, sometimes, an older gentleman, he's not as fast as those kids. Yeah, you have your mechanics and you work to do the best you can, but these are the realities of high-level talent. and what you're working to do. And these guys are doing the best they can to put themselves in position to make the best calls with really high-level talent.
You're exactly right. And I want to add that we're very fortunate in GAC to have some great high level, especially the varsity level. We'll get some very, very good umpires. I mean, several state umpires of the years, multiple guys work our games, through Greater St. Louis have all been Final Four officials. We're very, very lucky. But it's funny you mentioned the speed of the game because for several years, the state finals were here in St. Louis, here in St. Charles, So a lot of ADs people worked that event over at Car Shield. And I think one thing they kind of learned, the officials they got worked the Final Four, the highest ranked one, it's a reward for them. They want the best. But you'll get a Class 1 or Class 2 guy who umpired 90% of his games, Class 1 or Class 2. There might be the occasional guy hitting upper 80s, but most of the guys he sees are 70s, 80s. This lower majority of the kids are that way. Well, all of a sudden now you're putting him in a CBC versus Howell game where you may have a Veerling on the mound years ago or a Brett Graves or now, and you're seeing 92, 93, and you've never seen that before. And here you are in the state game, like, oh my, I just did 35 games at 75, and now I'm seeing 90,
It's tough because I remember the first time I saw 90 plus. It was a St. Louis Naturals. I think it was a kid from South. He was going to Mizzou. I wish I could remember his name, but it wasn't that long ago. It was like 2018, 20-something like that, 2017. Mizzou commit.
Yeah.
And I had just the day before done like 11U baseball,
Right.
and then you get behind the plate with this kid throwing 92 with a devastating curveball. And you as an umpire have to be prepared for that. And I just want people to understand it's not an easy thing to do this. And so give some of these guys some slack. They're doing they're juggling a lot because a lot of these umpires are doing youth baseball to high school baseball to college baseball. They're juggling a lot of this around, and you're seeing a lot of differences in just talent level, speed, all those things. So that's a suggestion from me. Just give them a little break. They're working hard to try and do the best they can.
And that's the thing, Brian. In my role, I've seen several studies about why they're leaving the game. And you can say the pandemic, some didn't come back after the pandemic. I get that. Some are just getting older and not wanting to do it. But the number one reason they all put is the way they're treated. Yeah. I mean, I don't care from what sport it is or what level it is. I've seen 20 of these different surveys and results. The number one reason they're leaving is how I get treated in the parking lot, how I get treated in the game. Because I'm trying to give up a couple of hours of my life, and I get talked down to and threatened and stuff like that. It's just not worth it. So to your point, there's a lot of factors playing into it, but hopefully we can all do better and just get emotional, love the game, but enjoy watching your kids compete. And just if you call it your way, just go to the next one,
Absolutely, bud. Absolutely. Scott Harris, folks, GAC president, Francis House Central super fan. Thought I'd throw that in there, man.
Hold on. I got to throw this in there before you close it out. I got to jump back to the beginning of the show. You know what looks best under the lights, because you brought this up?
Yeah?
Uniforms.
Uniforms. That's it. I thank you. I got my crack engineer over there, Scott, working, helping me keep things on track. And before we get out of here, we want to talk about uniforms, the beauty of uniforms. I was always a uniform hound myself, and always thought if you look good, you played good, right? That's the key. It's the same. It's the same thing with our friends over at Prime Sports Midwest. PrimeSportsMidwest.com or PrimeSportsMW.com. There it is. Yes, it does. Prime Sports Midwest and PrimeSportsMW.com. Our buddy over there, Rick Benz, getting you set up for your whatever, high school, youth, whatever the case may be, whatever uniform you need, they're there to get you taken care of. They do all the work on site. They can put up your team website for all your fan apparel, everything you need right there. Go to primesportsmw.com. Get yourself set up. Rick Benz, tell them YBM sent you. They're going to get you taken care of. Locally owned. I love that part of it. Locally owned. They do a great job. Rick, appreciate it. Prime Sports Midwest. Folks, thanks for tuning in. And again, Scott Harris, appreciate your time, sir, taking the time to come and talk to us.
No, Brian, I really enjoy it coming on. You can tell it's my passion. I love it. And I know I talk fast and get excited. I hope everybody can understand me on here. But, like, you guys give the big work. I'm a loyal listener. I love you and Matt and Kevin and everybody you have on here. Some great guests. So, being a baseball fan and a youth sports, high school sports fan, you do a great job. Keep up the great work. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir. Everybody, thanks for tuning in while you're here. If it's your first time you're watching, hit the subscribe button right there. Bang. And right next to it, if you hit that dinger, because that's what we do around here, we hit dingers. You get all your notifications for upcoming episodes. You can like, you can comment. Please comment below. Tell us what you think about these things. Share it out with your friends. We do appreciate that. Everybody, have a great day in the Lord. All you pitchers, keep throwing strikes, and hitters, hit them where they aim. We'll see y'all next time.